The door to the root cellar swung open with a creak that cut through the silence of the Wyoming evening, and Wade Dawson froze when he saw her huddled between the potato sacks and preserved jars, her eyes wide with terror in the lamplight. His hand instinctively moved toward the revolver at his hip, but something in those frightened eyes stopped him cold. She was young, maybe 20 or so, with dark hair matted against her pale face and a dress torn at the shoulder. Dirt streaked her cheeks, and her hands trembled as she pressed herself further into the corner of his cellar, as if she could disappear into the earthen walls themselves. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please don't send me back." Wade held the lamp higher, studying her carefully. He was 32 years old and had seen plenty of strange things in his years working cattle across the Wyoming territory, but finding a woman hiding in his cellar was definitely a first. His ranch sat 5 miles outside of Brownsville, isolated enough that visitors were rare and unexpected guests even rarer. "Back where?" he asked, keeping his voice calm and low the way he would with a spooked horse. She flinched at the question, drawing her knees closer to her chest. "To him." "To my husband." Wade noticed the bruise along her jawline then, purple and angry in the lamplight. Another marked her wrist where her sleeve had torn away. His jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. He had been reaching for a jar of pickled vegetables his neighbor misses. Henderson had given him last week, planning a simple supper after a long day mending fences. Now his evening had taken an entirely different turn. "What's your name?" he asked gently, crouching down but keeping his distance, not wanting to frighten her further. "Clara," she said after a long pause. Clara Preston. The name meant nothing to him, though Brownsville had grown considerably in the past year with the railroad expansion bringing new families west. It was 1882, and Wyoming was still rough territory, though civilization was creeping in slowly but surely. "I'm Wade Dawson. This is my ranch." He gestured around the small cellar. "How long have you been down here?" "Since this morning," Clara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw your wagon leave at dawn. I was hiding in the cottonwoods by the creek, and when you rode off, I thought I could rest somewhere safe for just a few hours. I was going to leave before you came back, but I fell asleep, and then I heard you return and I was too afraid to move." Wade considered this information carefully. She had been running all night then, probably longer. The creek was a good 2 miles from his house, which meant she had been desperate enough to cross open rangeland in daylight, risking exposure. "Who's your husband?" he asked. Clara's face went even paler if that was possible. "Marcus Preston. He owns the new mercantile in town, the big one on Main Street." Wade knew the place. Preston had arrived in Brownsville about 6 months ago with enough money to buy out old Mr. Ferguson's general store and expand it into something fancier. The man cut an impressive figure in his expensive suits, always talking about progress and modernization. Wade had bought supplies there a few times and found Preston to be polite enough, if a bit full of himself. "He hits you," Wade said. It was not a question. Clara's silence was answer enough. She looked down at her hands, shame coloring her features. That made Wade angry, not at her but at the situation that made a woman feel ashamed for someone else's cruelty. "Please," she said again, lifting her eyes to meet his. They were green, he noticed, the color of new grass in spring. "I know I'm trespassing. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. But please, just let me rest here tonight. I'll be gone by morning. He'll think I headed east toward Cheyenne. I'll go north instead, up toward Montana territory. I have a cousin there, or I did 3 years ago. Maybe she'll take me in." Montana was at least 200 miles away, probably more depending on where exactly this cousin lived. Clara Preston had no horse that he could see, no supplies, nothing but the torn dress on her back. She would never make it, especially not with winter coming on. It was only September now, but the nights were already getting cold, and a woman alone on the trail would face dangers far worse than the weather. Wade made a decision that would change both their lives, though he did not know it yet. "Come on up to the house," he said. "You need food and proper rest. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." Fear flashed across Clara's face again. "You won't tell him. You won't send word to town." "I won't tell anyone anything," Wade promised. "You have my word on that." She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether she could trust him. Whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied her, because she slowly unfolded herself from the corner, wincing as she stood. Wade noticed she favored her left leg. "Are you hurt?" he asked, reaching out instinctively to help her, but she pulled back. "Just bruised," she said quickly. "I can walk." She proved it by making her way to the cellar stairs, though Wade could see each step cost her. He followed with the lamp, lighting her way up into the main house. The evening had settled into full darkness now, stars beginning to emerge in the vast Wyoming sky. His house was simple but well-maintained. A 4-room structure with a kitchen, parlor, bedroom, and a small room he used for storage. It was more space than a single man needed, but Wade had built it 5 years ago with vague thoughts of a future family. Those thoughts had faded as the years passed, and he found himself more comfortable with cattle and horses than with the prospect of courting. Clara stood uncertainly in the kitchen, looking around as if she expected a trap to spring at any moment. Wade set the lamp on the table and moved to stoke the fire in the cook stove. "Sit down," he said, nodding toward one of the chairs. "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning," Clara admitted, lowering herself carefully into the chair. "Before he came home and found me packing." So she had tried to leave before, Wade realized. Preston must have discovered her plans and things had turned violent. The bruises on her face and wrist were probably the least of her injuries. He worked efficiently, slicing bread and cold beef left over from yesterday's supper, pouring water from the pump into a clean glass. It was not much, but it was what he had readily available. Clara ate slowly at first, as if afraid the food might be taken away, then with increasing hunger. Wade busied himself making coffee, giving her privacy to eat without being watched. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice stronger now. "I can't remember the last time someone showed me kindness." The words struck Wade harder than he expected. He turned to look at her properly now in the better light of the kitchen lamp. Despite the dirt and bruises, despite the exhaustion evident in every line of her body, Clara Preston was beautiful. But more than that, there was something in her eyes, a spark that even fear and abuse had not extinguished. Strength, maybe, or determination. It made him want to protect her, to stand between her and whatever had put that hunted look on her face. "How long have you been married?" he asked, sitting down across from her with his own cup of coffee. 8 months, Clara said. "We married in Kansas City last January. Marcus was so charming during our courtship. He brought flowers and said pretty words and promised me a good life out west. My parents had died the year before from influenza, and I was working as a seamstress, barely making enough to pay for my boarding house room. When he proposed, it seemed like a miracle, a way out of poverty, a chance for a real future. Wade could fill in the rest. Preston had probably been on his best behavior until the wedding was done and they were far from anyone Clara knew. Then the mask had come off. "When did it start?" he asked gently. "The first time was on the train west," Clara said, staring into her water glass. "I disagreed with him about something small, I cannot even remember what. He grabbed my arm so hard it left fingerprints. He apologized after, said the stress of the journey had gotten to him. I believed him." She laughed bitterly. "I believed him so many times." Every apology, every promise that it would not happen again, but it always did, and it kept getting worse. "Does anyone in town know?" Wade asked. "How could they? Marcus is very careful. He only hits where the bruises won't show, and we live above the mercantile, so there are no close neighbors to hear anything. In public, he's the perfect gentleman. Everyone thinks we're the ideal couple." The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. "When I finally decided to leave yesterday, I thought I was being smart about it. I packed a small bag and hid it in the storeroom. I was going to slip away while he was at a town council meeting, but he came back early and found the bag." She did not elaborate on what happened next, but Wade could see the shadow of it in her eyes. He felt a cold anger settling in his chest, the kind that made him want to ride into town and have a very direct conversation with Marcus Preston. But that would only make things worse for Clara. A man like Preston would see it as his right to reclaim his property, because that was how men like him viewed their wives. The law would be on his side too, for the most part. A woman running from her husband was not looked upon kindly, even by those who might privately sympathize. "You can stay here," Wade said. "As long as you need to." Clara's eyes widened. "I couldn't possibly. People would talk. Your reputation would be ruined." "I don't much care what people say," Wade replied, which was mostly true. He had never been one for town gossip. "Besides, no one needs to know you're here. The nearest neighbor is 3 miles away and I don't get many visitors. You can rest and heal, and when you're ready, I'll help you get to Montana properly, with supplies and a horse and enough money to see you through." "Why would you do this for me?" Clara asked, searching his face. "You don't know me. I'm another man's wife. You could get in serious trouble for harboring me." Wade considered the question. Why was he doing this? The simple answer was that it was the right thing to do, but there was something more. Something about the courage it must have taken for her to run, the fierce determination he saw beneath her fear. Something about those green eyes and the way she held herself despite everything, unbowed even if she was bent. "Because you asked me not to send you back," he said finally. "And because I believe everyone deserves a chance to be free." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes, and she brushed them away quickly, as if ashamed of the emotion. "I'll work to earn my keep. I'm a good cook and I can clean and mend. I won't be a burden." "You're not a burden," Wade said firmly. "You're a person in need of help. There's a difference." He showed her to his bedroom, insisting she take the bed while he would sleep on the settee in the parlor. Clara protested, but Wade was immovable on this point. She needed real rest, and the bed was more comfortable than any alternative he could offer. "Lock the door if it makes you feel safer," he told her. "I won't bother you." Clara nodded, something like relief crossing her face. "Thank you, Wade, truly." He left her there and returned to the kitchen to finish his own cold supper, though he found he had little appetite now. His mind kept turning over the situation, examining it from all angles. Preston would be looking for her, that was certain. The man would probably start in town, questioning anyone who might have seen her. Then he would expand his search to the surrounding area. Eventually, he might come here, though Wade hoped his ranch was far enough off the main roads to avoid immediate suspicion. The next morning, Wade woke before dawn as always, his back complaining about the settee but his mind already working through the day's tasks. He had cattle to check on and fences to inspect, but he found himself reluctant to leave the house with Clara inside. What if Preston somehow tracked her here while he was gone? What if she panicked and ran again, this time without proper supplies? He was making coffee when Clara emerged from the bedroom, her hair loose around her shoulders and her face freshly washed. In the morning light, he could see just how young she really was. Early 20s at most, with a life ahead of her that should have been full of possibility, not pain. "Good morning," she said quietly. I hope I didn't take your bed for nothing. Did you sleep all right? Well enough, Wade lied. How are you feeling? Better than I have in months, Clara admitted. She moved carefully, still favoring that left leg, but there was more life in her eyes this morning. I slept without fear for the first time in I don't know how long. That's worth more than I can say. They ate breakfast together in comfortable silence, Wade trying not to stare at her across the table. There was something intimate about sharing a morning meal, about the quiet domestic scene they made. It stirred feelings in him he thought had long since settled into dormancy. I need to check on the cattle today, he said finally. Will you be all right here alone? Worry flickered across Clara's face, but she nodded. I'll stay inside and keep away from the windows. If anyone comes, I'll hide in the cellar again. There's a rifle above the door, Wade told her. Do you know how to use one? My father taught me when I was young. I'm not a great shot, but I know the basics. Hopefully you won't need it, but I'd feel better knowing you have protection. He paused, then added, I should be back by early afternoon. There's bread and cheese in the larder if you get hungry. Clara nodded again, and Wade could see her forcing herself to be brave. It could not be easy, staying alone in a strange place while knowing her husband was likely searching for her. But she did not complain, just lifted her chin and met his eyes steadily. Be careful, she said. Those two words affected Wade more than they should have. It had been a long time since anyone cared whether he was careful or not. He found himself smiling despite the serious nature of the situation. Always am, he said. He rode out to the north pasture where most of his herd grazed, but his mind was not fully on the cattle. He kept thinking about Clara back at the house, alone and afraid. He kept thinking about what kind of man would beat a woman, especially one as obviously spirited and kind as she seemed to be. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became, which was not helpful. Anger did not solve problems. Careful planning did. By the time he returned to the ranch in mid-afternoon, Wade had the beginnings of an idea forming. It was risky and would require patience, but it might give Clara a real chance at freedom. He would need to discuss it with her first, though. It was her life, her choice. He would not make decisions for her the way Preston clearly had. He found her in the kitchen, having cleaned the entire room and started bread dough rising in a bowl by the stove. She looked up when he entered, relief evident on her face. Everything was quiet, she reported. No one came by. Good, Wade said, hanging his hat on the peg by the door. I've been thinking about your situation. I might have an idea, but I want to hear what you think first. They sat at the table again, and Wade laid out his thoughts. Montana is a long way off, and traveling there would be dangerous even with supplies. Winter is coming, and a woman alone on the trail would attract attention, the kind you don't want. But what if you stayed here, not permanently if you don't want to, but at least through the winter? We could tell people you're my cousin from back east, come to keep house for me. It's not unusual for unmarried men to have female relatives stay with them. As long as we're careful about you being seen in town, Preston might not make the connection. Clara listened intently, her expression thoughtful. But what about in the spring? He'll still be looking for me then. In the spring, we could arrange for you to travel to Montana properly. I have some friends up that way who run a ranch near Billings. Good people who would help you get established. By then, Preston might have given up the search, or at least the intensity of it would have died down, and you'd be strong again, ready to start fresh. You do all that for me? Clara asked, her voice soft with wonder. Why? Wade met her eyes across the table. Because it's the right thing to do, and because I think you deserve a chance to live without fear. She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the worn wood of the table. What if someone recognizes me? Brownsville isn't that big. Surely some people have seen me with Marcus. You mostly stayed above the mercantile, right? And when you did go out, you were with Preston, who everyone was looking at because he's new and important. People see what they expect to see. A woman traveling with Marcus Preston is his wife. A woman living quietly on a ranch 5 miles from town is my cousin. As long as we're careful, it could work. It's a risk for you, Clara pointed out. If Marcus finds out, he could cause trouble. He has money and influence. Let me worry about that, Wade said. The question is whether you're willing to stay. I know it's not the same as being truly free, and you'd have to be cautious about being seen. But it's safe, at least, and it gives you time to plan properly. Clara took a deep breath, and Wade could see her weighing the options. Run now with nothing and risk dying on the trail, or stay and risk discovery, but have a real chance at escape come spring. When she looked up at him again, there was determination in those green eyes. All right, she said. I'll stay. But I meant what I said about earning my keep. I'll cook and clean and do whatever else needs doing. I won't be a charity case. Fair enough, Wade agreed. Though I should warn you, I'm pretty set in my bachelor ways. You might find me difficult to live with. A small smile crossed Clara's face, the first real smile he had seen from her. It transformed her features, making her look young and almost carefree. I'll take my chances. Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. Wade handled the outdoor work, tending cattle and horses and maintaining the property. Clara took over the house with an efficiency that impressed him. She cooked proper meals instead of the haphazard fare he usually threw together. She mended his clothes, which had been in desperate need of attention. She kept everything clean and organized without making a fuss about it. But more than that, they talked. In the evenings after supper, sitting in the parlor with the lamp burning low, they shared their stories. Wade told her about growing up in Missouri, about coming west after his parents died and building this ranch from nothing. About the hard winters and the good years, the cattle drives and the quiet satisfaction of watching something grow from your own labor. Clara told him about her childhood in Ohio, about a happy family destroyed by disease, about the desperate years after as a seamstress in Kansas City, the grinding poverty and constant fear, about meeting Marcus Preston and thinking he was her salvation, only to discover she had traded one kind of suffering for another. The worst part was feeling trapped, she said one evening about a week after she had arrived. Every day I woke up wondering if this would be the day he finally went too far, wondering if I was strong enough to keep pretending everything was fine. The bruises healed, but the fear never did. Wade listened, anger simmering under his carefully maintained calm. He had never been a violent man, preferring to solve problems with words or simply walking away. But the thought of someone hurting Clara made him want to break that pattern. "You're safe here," he said, not for the first time. "I promise you that." "I believe you," Clara replied, and the trust in her voice made something warm unfold in Wade's chest. As September turned to October, the weather grew colder and the leaves on the cottonwoods by the creek turned gold. Clara's bruises faded, though Wade suspected the internal scars would take much longer to heal. She moved more freely now, no longer wincing with every step. Her smiles came more easily. She even laughed sometimes at Wade's dry observations about the horses or the weather. Wade found himself looking forward to the end of each day, to coming back to a warm house and hot food in Clara's company. She was intelligent and funny when she let herself be, with opinions on everything from politics to philosophy. She challenged him in ways he had not been challenged in years, made him think about things he had taken for granted. He was falling in love with her. The realization came to him one evening in late October as he watched her knead bread dough, flour dusting her arms, and a look of concentration on her face. He loved the way she hummed while she worked, loved the way she took care of things without being asked, loved the way she looked at the world with wonder despite everything she had been through. But loving her and acting on it were two different things. She was still technically married, still traumatized by what Preston had done to her. The last thing Wade wanted was to make her feel pressured or trapped in a different way. So he kept his feelings to himself, content for now just to be near her, to know she was safe. One afternoon in early November, Wade had to make a trip into Brownsville for supplies. He had put it off as long as possible, but they needed flour and sugar and other staples he could not produce on the ranch. He left early in the morning, promising Clara he would be back by evening. "Stay inside," he reminded her. "Keep the doors locked." "I will," she assured him. "Don't worry about me, just be careful in town." Brownsville was bustling when Wade arrived, the main street crowded with wagons and horses. The railroad expansion had brought prosperity, and new buildings seemed to spring up every time he visited. He tied his horse outside Ferguson's old mercantile, which now bore a fancy painted sign reading Preston's General Goods and Sundries. Inside, the store was much grander than it had been under the previous owner. Polished wood counters, organized shelves, imported goods from back east, and behind the main counter stood Marcus Preston himself, helping a customer with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Wade kept his hat pulled low and browsed the aisles, gathering what he needed while keeping Preston in his peripheral vision. The man was tall and well-built, with dark hair slicked back, and a suit that probably cost more than Wade made in 6 months. Handsome in a polished way that Wade supposed some women would find attractive. But there was something cold about him, something calculating in the way he looked at people as if assessing their worth. "Can I help you find something?" Wade turned to find a young clerk at his elbow, a pimply boy of maybe 16 looking eager to assist. "Just need these things," Wade said, handing over his list. "And 50 pounds of flour." "Yes, sir. I'll get that together for you right away." As the clerk scurried off, Wade found himself face to face with Preston, who had finished with his previous customer and was now studying Wade with sharp eyes. "You're Wade Dawson, aren't you?" Preston said, extending a hand. "We've met before. You have that ranch west of town." "That's right," Wade said, shaking the offered hand briefly. Preston's grip was firm to the point of being aggressive, as if he had something to prove. "Don't see you in town much," Preston observed. "Keeping busy out at your place." "Always plenty to do on a ranch," Wade replied, keeping his tone neutral. "Place doesn't run itself. I admire that. Hard work, independence, building something with your own hands. That's the spirit that made this country great." Preston leaned against the counter, his posture casual but his eyes intent. "Say, you haven't happened to see a woman traveling alone out your way, have you? Dark hair, early 20s, might have looked lost or distressed." Wade's heart rate picked up, but he kept his expression mildly curious. "Can't say that I have. Something wrong," Preston's jaw tightened. "My wife. She's been missing for over a month now, left without a word, took nothing with her. I'm worried sick something might have happened to her. The wilderness can be dangerous for a woman alone." The concern in his voice might have sounded genuine to someone who did not know better. Wade just nodded sympathetically. "That's tough. Have you talked to the sheriff, of course? He's been searching, but no sign of her anywhere. It's like she vanished." Preston's eyes bored into Wade's. "If you do see her or hear anything, I'd be grateful if you'd let me know. I just want to know she's safe." "Sure thing," Wade said. "I'll keep an eye out." The clerk returned then with Wade's supplies, and he was able to extract himself from the conversation. But as he loaded the goods into his wagon, he could feel Preston's eyes on him from the store window. Had the man suspected something? Or was he just desperate enough to question everyone? Wade drove home faster than strictly necessary, relief flooding through him when he saw the ranch house intact and peaceful. Clara met him at the door, clearly having been watching for his return. "How did it go?" she asked as he unloaded the supplies. "Preston is still looking for you," Wade said. "He asked me directly if I had seen you." Clara went pale. "What did you say?" "That I hadn't. He seemed to accept it, but I don't think we can assume he'll stop looking. The man is obsessed." Wade carried the flour inside and set it on the kitchen counter. "We need to be extra careful now. No going outside during the day at all, even just to the porch, and if anyone comes to the ranch, you hide immediately." "I understand," Clara said quietly. "Wade, I'm sorry. I never meant to bring danger to your door." He turned to face her fully, setting his hands on her shoulders gently. "None of this is your fault. You hear me? Preston is the one who made this situation. You're just trying to survive." She looked up at him, and Wade saw tears shimmering in her eyes. "I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't found your cellar that day. I think I might have just laid down and died." "But you didn't," Wade said firmly. "You fought. You survived, and you're going to keep surviving." Clara nodded, and then, to Wade's surprise, she stepped forward and hugged him. It was brief, just a moment of contact, but it sent electricity through his entire body. She smelled like the bread she had been baking and something floral he could not identify. When she stepped back, her cheeks were flushed. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Winter arrived in earnest in December, bringing snow that blanketed the ranch in white and made travel difficult. Wade was secretly grateful for it. The weather would keep Preston in town, would make any searching he wanted to do nearly impossible. It also gave him and Clara even more time together, cozy in the warm house while the wind howled outside. They celebrated Christmas quietly, just the two of them. Wade had never been much for holidays, but Clara insisted on making it special. She cooked a ham that she had asked him to buy on his last supply run and made pies from preserved apples. She even crafted decorations from bits of ribbon and pine boughs, making the simple house feel festive. "I haven't had a real Christmas since my parents died," she admitted as they sat by the fire that evening, cups of hot cider in their hands. "This means more to me than you know." "I'm glad," Wade said. He had a gift for her, something he had been working on in secret during his evening hours. It was a small wooden box, carefully carved and sanded smooth with a simple latch. Nothing fancy, but made with care. Clara opened it with wonder, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "It's beautiful. You made this." "Figured you could use somewhere to keep things," Wade said, suddenly feeling awkward. "It's not much." "It's perfect," Clara said firmly. She set the box carefully on the table and reached into her pocket, pulling out a folded handkerchief. "I made you this. I know it's not much either, but I wanted to give you something." Wade unfolded the handkerchief to find his initials carefully embroidered in one corner, the stitches small and perfect. The fabric was from an old shirt of his that had been too worn to mend, but she had cut out a good section and hemmed it into something new. "I love it," he said honestly. "Thank you, Clara." They smiled at each other across the fire, and Wade felt the distance between them shrinking. He wanted to kiss her, wanted to pull her close and tell her everything he was feeling. But he held back, afraid of pushing too fast, of making her uncomfortable. As if reading his mind, Clara said quietly, "I know I'm still married legally, but I don't feel married. I feel like that part of my life was a terrible mistake, something that happened to a different person. Does that make sense?" "It makes perfect sense," Wade assured her. "When I'm with you, I feel like myself again. Like the person I was before Marcus, before all the fear and pain. You make me feel safe, but more than that, you make me feel valued, seen." She paused, seeming to gather courage. I think I'm falling in love with you, Wade Dawson. Wade's heart felt too big for his chest. He set down his cider and moved to sit beside her on the settee, taking her hand in his. I love you too, he said simply. I've been trying to give you space to heal, but I can't help it. You're everything I never knew I was looking for. Clara's smile was radiant. Then stop trying not to. I don't want space, I want you. This time when Wade kissed her, there was no hesitation. Her lips were soft and warm, and she kissed him back with a passion that spoke of feelings too long suppressed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. We'll figure this out, he promised. Whatever it takes, we'll find a way for you to be truly free. I already am, Clara whispered. Here with you, I'm already free. The winter passed in a blur of contentment. They were careful never to let their relationship progress beyond kissing and holding each other, both aware that Clara's marriage, however unwanted, still technically existed. But the emotional intimacy they shared was profound. Wade had never felt so connected to another person, so completely understood and accepted. Clara told him about her dreams for the future, about maybe opening a dress shop someday or teaching children to read. Wade shared his own hopes about expanding the ranch, about breeding better quality cattle. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from the profound to the silly. One evening in late January, as they sat together reading by the fire, Clara suddenly said, I want to divorce Marcus. Wade looked up from his book. That's not easy to do, especially not here, I know. A woman has to prove cruelty or abandonment, and even then, the courts often side with the husband. But I have to try, Wade. I can't spend the rest of my life technically belonging to a man who hurt me. I want to be free completely legally. I want the right to marry again if I choose. She met his eyes meaningfully. And I think I will choose when the time comes. Wade felt hope surge through him. Then we'll find a way. I can take you to Cheyenne when the spring thaw comes. There are lawyers there who might be willing to help, especially if we can find other women Marcus has hurt. Men like him don't usually limit their violence to one person. Do you really think there might be others? Clara asked. I'd be surprised if there weren't. He's the type who likes control, who sees people as things to be used. That kind of rot runs deep. Wade set his book aside and took her hand. If we can find even one other woman willing to testify, it would strengthen your case considerably. Clara nodded slowly. After I left, after I'd been hiding in the cottonwoods that whole night before I found your cellar, I saw him in town looking for me. He was questioning people, and he spoke to this woman, the one who works at the boarding house. The way she flinched when he got close, the way she wouldn't meet his eyes. I wondered then if maybe I wasn't the first. What's her name, do you know? Mrs. Garrett, I think. Her husband died a few years back, and she runs the boarding house to support herself and her daughter. Wade filed the information away. When spring came, he would make some careful inquiries. But for now, the snow was still thick on the ground and travel was nearly impossible. They would have to wait. February brought a brief warm spell that melted much of the snow, and Wade took advantage of it to check on his cattle and repair some winter damage to the fences. He was working on a broken post when he saw a rider approaching from the direction of town. His stomach clenched with anxiety. Help you with something, Wade called out as the man drew near. It was Sheriff Tom Brennan, a decent enough man in his 50s with a reputation for fairness. Afternoon, Dawson, Brennan said, tipping his hat. Mind if I ask you a few questions? About what? Wade asked, though he already knew. Marcus Preston's missing wife. He's been pretty insistent that I keep looking, and I'm checking with everyone in the area again. You said back in November you hadn't seen her. That's still the case. Wade met the sheriff's eyes steadily. Haven't seen any strange women around here, if that's what you're asking. It was not quite a lie. Clara was not strange, not anymore. She was familiar, beloved, essential. Brennan studied him for a moment, and Wade had the uncomfortable feeling the man saw more than he was letting on. But finally, the sheriff just nodded. Fair enough. Preston's convinced she couldn't have gotten far without help. Says she didn't know anyone in the area, had no money, no survival skills. What do you think? Wade asked carefully. Brennan shrugged. I think women are more resourceful than men give them credit for. And I think a person desperate enough can survive things you wouldn't expect. Between you and me, I'm not sure I'd want to find her just to send her back. Preston's a cold one. Never seen him show genuine emotion about anything, including his missing wife. It's all performance, if you ask me. Wade felt a surge of respect for the sheriff. That's an interesting observation. I've been doing this job a long time. You learn to read people. Brennan gathered his reins. Well, I've done my due diligence. I'll let Preston know I checked. You take care, Dawson. You too, Sheriff. Wade watched the lawman ride away, then hurried back to the house. Clara met him at the door, worry written all over her face. I saw someone coming. Was it Marcus, the sheriff? But I think we're all right. He's not stupid, and I got the feeling he doesn't particularly like Preston. Wade pulled her into a hug. We just need to keep being careful. March arrived with muddy roads and the first green shoots pushing through the earth. Wade began planning their trip to Cheyenne, figuring they could leave in April when travel would be easier. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Wade was in the barn one afternoon when he heard Clara scream. He ran to the house, heart pounding, and burst through the door to find Marcus Preston standing in the kitchen, his hand gripping Clara's arm hard enough to leave marks. "Let her go," Wade said, his voice deadly calm even as rage flooded through him. Preston's eyes were wild, triumphant. "I knew it. I knew someone had to be hiding her. You've been harboring my wife, Dawson. That's a crime." "What's a crime is what you did to her," Wade shot back. "Look at her arm where you're holding her. You're hurting her right now. She's my wife. I have every right to discipline her as I see fit." Preston yanked Clara closer. "Come along, Clara. We're going home." "No," Clara said, her voice shaking but determined. "I'm not going anywhere with you." Preston's face darkened. "You don't have a choice." "Actually, she does," Wade said, moving closer. "Wyoming law says a woman has the right to seek protection from an abusive husband. Sheriff Brennan told me that himself just last month. It was not entirely true, but Preston did not know that." The man's eyes darted between Wade and Clara, calculating his options. "This isn't over," he said finally. "I'll have the law on you, Dawson. Harboring another man's wife, alienation of affection. You'll lose everything." "I don't think so," said a new voice from the doorway. They all turned to see Sheriff Brennan standing there, his hand resting casually on his holstered pistol. "Let the lady go, Preston." "Sheriff, thank God," Preston said, though he did not release Clara's arm. "I've found my wife. This man has been keeping her here against her will." "That true, Mrs. Preston?" Brennan asked, looking directly at Clara. "No," Clara said firmly. "I've been here because Wade offered me sanctuary from my husband's abuse. Marcus beat me regularly, Sheriff. That's why I ran." "She's lying," Preston insisted. "She's unstable, emotional. Women get these ideas in their heads." "Funny thing," Brennan said conversationally. "After I visited here last month, I got to thinking about what you'd said about your wife. How she had no friends, no connections in town. Seemed odd for a woman who'd been here 8 months. So I did some asking around. Turns out Mrs. Garrett at the boarding house remembers your wife coming into the mercantile once with bruises on her wrists. And Miss Chen, who does laundry, said she saw Mrs. Preston with a black eye that you claimed came from a fall." Preston's face was turning red. This is ridiculous. She's my wife. What happens between a man and his wife is private. Not when it involves violence, Brennan said. Now let her go before I arrest you for assault. I'm watching you do it right now, so I'd have grounds. For a moment, Wade thought Preston might refuse. But then the man released Clara's arm with a shove that sent her stumbling. Wade caught her, pulling her protectively against his side. This isn't over, Preston repeated. I'll file for divorce and take everything she has, which is nothing since it's all mine anyway. Actually, Brennan said, Wyoming is one of the few territories where women have equal rights in divorce proceedings. Any property purchased during the marriage is split evenly. And given the evidence of abuse, I'd say a judge would be inclined to favor Mrs. Preston. Preston's expression turned ugly. You're all against me, this whole town. Fine. Keep the ungrateful woman. She was never worth the trouble anyway. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. They heard his horse galloping away moments later, and only then did Wade allow himself to breathe properly. Thank you, Sheriff, Clara said, her voice unsteady. How did you know to come? I didn't, not exactly. But I had a feeling Preston might have figured out where you were. He's been watching Dawson's ranch for the past week, waiting for proof. When I saw him ride out this direction today with that look on his face, I decided to follow. Brennan tipped his hat to them both. For what it's worth, I think you two did the right thing. Preston needed to be stopped. What happens now? Wade asked. Now we file the proper paperwork. Mrs. Preston will need to formally petition for divorce, and there will be a hearing. But given what I've witnessed today and what I can testify to, I don't think there will be much question about the outcome. Preston might contest it, but he won't win. Clara sagged against Wade in relief. It's really going to be all right. It's really going to be all right, Brennan confirmed. Though I'd suggest you two keep things proper until the divorce is finalized. No sense giving Preston any ammunition about improper conduct. They both nodded, and the sheriff left them with instructions to come to town the next day to begin the legal process. When they were alone, Clara turned to Wade and buried her face in his chest. I was so scared, she whispered. When he grabbed me, for a moment I was back in that terrible place, feeling helpless and trapped. But you weren't helpless, Wade reminded her. You stood up to him, you told the truth, and you had people on your side. I had you, Clara said, looking up at him. That made all the difference. The divorce proceedings took 2 months, a tense time during which Clara had to recount the details of her abuse for a judge and several witnesses. Wade attended every hearing, sitting in the back of the courtroom as moral support. Preston tried to paint Clara as an unfaithful wife, and Wade as a home wrecker. But the testimony of Mrs. Garrett and Miss Chen, both of whom had seen Clara's injuries, combined with Sheriff Brennan's account of Preston's violence, made the outcome inevitable. On a warm day in late May, the judge granted Clara her divorce on grounds of cruelty. She was awarded half the value of the mercantile and all her personal possessions, though she told the judge she wanted none of it except her freedom. I don't want his money, she said. I just want to never be tied to him again. The judge respected her wishes, and Clara walked out of that courtroom a free woman. Wade was waiting for her on the courthouse steps, and when she saw him, she ran the last few steps and threw herself into his arms. It's over, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. It's really over. It's over, Wade agreed, holding her tight. What do you want to do now? Clara pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining. I want to go home, to our home. And then, when enough time has passed that it's respectable, I want to marry you, Wade Dawson. If you'll have me. If I'll have you, Wade repeated, shaking his head in wonder. Clara, I've wanted nothing else since the day you told me you were falling in love with me. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They were married in August in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Sheriff Brennan standing as witness and Mrs. Henderson from the neighboring ranch bringing a beautiful cake. Clara wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric Wade had bought her in Cheyenne, cream-colored with tiny blue flowers. She looked so beautiful that Wade felt his throat tighten when he saw her. They spoke their vows under the cottonwood trees by the creek where Clara had hidden that desperate night nearly a year ago. It seemed fitting, Wade thought, to make their promises of love in the place where Clara's journey to freedom had truly begun. "I promise to love you, protect you, and honor you for all my days," Wade said, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your home." "I promise to love you with everything I am," Clara replied. "I promise to build a life with you filled with joy and laughter and hope. I promise to be your home too, wherever we are." When they kissed as husband and wife, Wade felt something settle in his soul, a rightness he had been searching for his entire life without knowing it. Their first year of marriage was everything Wade had hoped for and more. Clara thrived in her freedom, her personality fully emerging now that she was no longer afraid. She was funny and passionate and sometimes stubborn, but always loving. She started a small business sewing dresses for the women in town, her skill with a needle bringing in extra income and giving her a sense of independence she treasured. Wade expanded the ranch, buying more cattle and hiring a young hand to help with the work. This gave him more time to spend with Clara, and they used it well, taking long rides across the property, having picnics by the creek, sitting up late talking about their dreams. In the spring of their second year together, Clara told Wade she was pregnant. They had been hoping for this, though Wade had been in no rush, knowing Clara needed time to heal from all she had been through. But when she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach, Wade felt tears spring to his eyes. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Clara asked, searching his face. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Wade assured her. "I'm overwhelmed, terrified, completely in love with you and this little person we made." Their son was born in November 1884, squalling and healthy and perfect. They named him Samuel after Clara's father. Wade held him for the first time and marveled at the tiny features, the small fingers that gripped his thumb with surprising strength. "He's beautiful," Wade whispered. "You did such good work, Clara." "We did good work," Clara corrected, tired but radiant. "This is our miracle, Wade." Watching Clara with their son over the following months, Wade sometimes thought about that night he had found her in his cellar, terrified and desperate. Who could have imagined that encounter would lead to this? To a home filled with love and laughter, to a family he had never expected to have, to happiness that felt almost too big to contain. Marcus Preston had left Brownsville not long after the divorce, selling the mercantile and moving on to some other town where no one knew his history. Good riddance, Wade thought whenever he remembered the man. Clara rarely spoke of him, and when she did, it was only to marvel at how far she had come from that dark time. "Sometimes I can hardly believe that frightened woman hiding in your cellar was me," she said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset while Samuel napped in his cradle. "I feel like a completely different person now." "You are the same person," Wade said. "Just free to be yourself." That woman in the cellar had courage and strength. She survived and fought for better. That's still you, Clara. It's always been you. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm so grateful I found your cellar that day, so grateful you didn't send me back." "I'm grateful too," Wade said, kissing the top of her head. "You gave me everything I didn't know I needed." They had 2 more children over the years, a daughter they named Rose in 1886 and another son, Thomas, in 1888. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful in the region. Clara's sewing business grew until she had more commissions than she could handle, and she hired 2 other women to help her. Wade took pride in watching her confidence bloom, in seeing her become a respected member of the community, rather than the frightened woman who had once hidden in his cellar. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wade took Clara back to the cottonwood trees by the creek for a picnic, just the 2 of them while Mrs. Henderson watched the children. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" Wade asked as they sat together on a blanket, the creek babbling beside them. "When I found you in the cellar, I said, 'Please don't send me back,'" Clara replied. "How could I forget? It was the most terrifying and important moment of my life. I've thought about that a lot over the years. What would have happened if I had sent you back, or if I had never found you at all?" Wade shook his head. "I can't imagine my life without you now. You and the children, you're everything to me." "You saved my life that night," Clara said. "Not just by not sending me back, but by giving me a reason to believe in goodness again. By showing me what real love looks like." "You saved mine too," Wade told her. "I didn't even realize I was lonely until you came along and filled up all the empty spaces." They kissed as the sun set, the same sun that had been setting on this land for eons, indifferent to the small human dramas played out beneath it. But to Wade and Clara, their drama was everything. It was love born from desperation and fear, transformed into something beautiful and lasting. Years passed in a blur of seasons, of children growing and the ranch expanding, of quiet moments and joyful celebrations. Samuel grew tall and strong, eventually taking over much of the ranch work from his aging father. Rose became a teacher, bringing education to the children of Brownsville. Thomas followed his mother's artistic bent, becoming a skilled carpenter whose furniture was sought after across Wyoming. Wade and Clara grew old together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down. But their love remained as strong as ever, deepened by decades of partnership and shared life. One evening in their later years, long after the children had grown and built their own lives, Wade and Clara sat on their porch watching the sunset as they had done countless times before. Wade's joints ached with arthritis and Clara's eyes were not as sharp as they once were, but they still sat close, still held hands, still found comfort in each other's presence. "I've been thinking," Clara said, "about that night I hid in your cellar. About how scared I was, how certain I was that my life was over." "What about it?" Wade asked. "I was right in a way. That life was over. The life where I was afraid and small and trapped. It ended that night. And a new life began, one I could never have imagined. One with love and freedom and joy." She turned to look at him, her green eyes still bright despite the years. "You gave me that new life, Wade. I never properly thanked you for it." "You thank me every day," Wade said, squeezing her hand. "Every morning I wake up next to you, every meal we share, every time you smile at me. That's all the thanks I need." "I love you," Clara said simply. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Wade replied. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara Dawson. The absolute best thing." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The ranch spread out before them, the result of decades of hard work and dedication. But more important than the land or the cattle or the house was what they had built together. A family, a life, a love that had overcome fear and violence and uncertainty to become something unshakable. Inside the house, they could hear their grandchildren playing, the sounds of laughter and joy that filled the spaces. Samuel had brought his 3 children over for dinner, and they would stay the night, as they often did. The house that had once been so quiet and lonely was now full of life and noise and love. "We did good work," Clara said, echoing the words she had spoken when Samuel was born. "We did good work," Wade agreed, pulling her closer. As darkness fell, and the stars emerged one by one in the vast Wyoming sky, Wade thought about the course of their lives, about how a single moment of compassion and courage had changed everything. He had not hesitated that night when Clara begged him not to send her back. He had seen someone in need and helped without thinking about the cost to himself, and in return he had received everything: love, family, purpose, joy. A life so full and rich that sometimes he could hardly believe it was his. Clara yawned, leaning more heavily against him. "Should we go in? The children will wonder where we are." "In a minute," Wade said. "Let's stay here just a little longer." So they stayed, two people who had found each other in the darkness and built something luminous together. Two people who had proven that even in the hardest times, even when all seems lost, love can emerge and flourish and transform everything it touches. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and uncaring. But beneath them, on a ranch in Wyoming, in the hearts of two people who had fought for their right to be together, there was warmth and light and an enduring love that would outlast the stars themselves. Inside, a grandchild called for them, and Clara stirred. "We should really go in." "All right," Wade said, helping her to her feet with the gentleness of long practice. "Let's go home." And hand in hand, they walked into the warm, bright house, into the laughter and chaos and love that was their life. The life that had started with 6 words spoken in fear in a dark cellar. "Please don't send me back." Words that had changed everything. Words that had set them both free.